Hello, everyone. This is Deshae Peacock of Sweet Spot Style. I am an author and a lifestyle coach, and today we're doing a webinar called Get Your First Book Deal. And I'd like to introduce Suzanne Kingsbury. You want to say hi, Suzanne?
Hi, everybody. We're so happy you're here.
Yeah, so we're really excited to have you. Let me just read Suzanne's official bio. Suzanne is a good friend of mine. We've known each other for years. Oh, hold on. Now I'm hearing a backlash. Let me just get out of this. There. Sorry about that. So thanks for coming to the webinar today. I really hope you get a lot of value at it. I certainly have learned a lot in the last year or two about writing a book, and Suzanne is an expert at it. So we have a lot to share and a little bit of time, so I'm just going to jump in and I'm going to officially read Suzanne's bio. So here we go. Suzanne Kingsbury is an award-winning, critically acclaimed author whose books have been optioned for film and sold widely abroad. She is the founder of Gateless Writing, a nationwide organization for writers who are working to move their books to the point of publication and beyond. Called the Book Shaman, she has helped hundreds of people make their dreams of becoming authors a reality. So, and that's all true. She's helped hundreds of people, and she's helped me. And just briefly, while people are signing on, is it okay if I tell them the story of how we met, Suzanne?
Go right ahead.
Okay, awesome. So I was working at Marlboro College, which is a liberal arts college, and for 4 years I was the director of career development. And I was teaching people how to figure out how to do work they love. And during that time I saw lots of results, people getting amazing internships and scholarships and getting jobs that, you know, were their dream jobs. And I thought, you know, I need to do this for myself. I need to take my own advice. And so I actually the first thing I did was I decided to start this local TV show. And the very first person I interviewed was Suzanne. And I didn't know Suzanne, so I live in this very small town, Brattleboro, Vermont, and, you know, there's maybe 13,000 people here. And, like, why had I not met Suzanne before? So, you know, I interviewed Suzanne, and the criteria was that you're living in your sweet spot, meaning that you're doing work that you love and you're getting paid for it. And she totally, even at that time, was. So at the end of the interview, we just hit it off and became friends. And then Suzanne introduced me to my current agent, who's Dee Dee Cummings. And Dee Dee, the first thing she said was, you need to write a book. So originally we were going to try to get the show going nationally, but Dee Dee was like, no, you need to write a book first. Just write a book. So it was really funny how Suzanne was the first person I interviewed for that show as I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Then she introduced me to Dee Dee, and then I wrote the book. Within a year, I had quit my job, and now I'm in my 12th month of business working for myself. My life has completely changed, and none of that would have happened if I hadn't met Suzanne. So thank you so much, because really what you've done is you've helped me create the life that I craved, the life that I dreamed of. I didn't know how. I just knew there's circumstances around it. I knew I wanted to work from home. I knew I wanted to do something creative. I knew I wanted to share positive stories, and I love beauty. And so, but I didn't know how, and I had no idea it was going to be through a book. So you could call it luck, or you could call it serendipity, but I'm really glad that I met Suzanne. And so we just want to share with you today how writing your first book can really take you to new places. It can open the doors to places you don't even know that's possible, and it really positions you as an expert. So today's objective, let me just tell you today's objective. I'm going to read it. To learn how to position yourself as an expert, grow your business, and write your book at the same time. You don't need previous publishing experience or a huge platform. So Suzanne, why don't you pop back on and let me just ask you, well, I guess first I'm going to share a little bit more about my book process. Also, there's a chat button I should let you know. I'm going to check in with the chat. If you don't mind, as you're signing on, just say hello. And I'm using a second screen here. Do you see anything on the chat yet, Suzanne?
I don't see any messages, but I see a lot of people are here.
I
I
see a
see
lot of
some
people
people
here.
I know, and I'm so happy to see them.
Yeah, awesome. So you guys pop into the chat box and you can ask us questions as we go through this process. If you have anything in particular you'd like to know, please ask, and we'll be monitoring this chat box and make sure all of your questions get answered. So as I was saying, just a little bit about my story. I guess it was about 2 years ago that this process started, that I started to think about the book, and I had met Dee Dee in the summer. I think it was 2012. And my agent is Dee Dee. And so we wrote the proposal. I think I submitted it in June of 2012, and I got my first offer in November. But I had some other publishers interested, so I waited for about 6 months as I was trying to make a decision, and then I took the offer. So then after that, it was just a matter of writing the book. And I actually kept my job at the college, and I wrote the book and worked full time. And have a daughter. So I did that because I knew that I needed that space, the financial space to write the book and keep my income at my job. And then after the book was written, then I developed, as I was writing the book and the proposal, I started to develop the brand Sweet Spot Style. So it really helped me create a business at the same time I was writing the book. I'm a very multi-passionate person, so I had lots of ideas, and I needed to really focus. And the way I did that was through the book proposal. The original book was a completely different book. It was just too many ideas, personal style and home decor, and just too much stuff. So writing the proposal actually helped me create my brand. And then through that process, I started seeing private clients. I'm doing my first retreat in Mexico in February, and the doors have just opened up. So that's sort of the very short story of my book publication. It came out this year in June, and within 20 days it had sold out. And now it's in its second printing. So I'm pretty happy about that. So Suzanne, jump in here and let me ask you, one of the things that we're talking about is the difference between signing with a publisher and being self-published. There's so much talk about this online. What are the differences? What are the benefits and maybe the non-benefits of going with a publisher or self-publishing?
So it's a great question, and it's like one of the really first things that a lot of people who contact me ask about, because self-publishing has gotten so big. The industry is changing very quickly. The main difference is if you're trying to publish a novel, particularly a novel that's in a genre that's not like, you know, crime or romance or, you know, that's literary fiction, really the best thing to do is go with an indie publisher that's specializes in fiction, or to go with a traddy, like a traditional New York publisher, particularly with any agent. So that's sort of what the fiction market looks like. The exception to that is if you've already built a name for yourself in literary fiction, then it's okay. Because you have your readership, and you can think about self-publishing, like someone like Steve Almond has done that and done really well. There's a number of people who have decided to take the autonomy back. If you're publishing a nonfiction book, memoir is also sort of in that same category as the novel. But if you're publishing like a how-to book, or I Change, You Change, which is like I'm writing about my story of change, and I hope that this creates an alchemy within my reader. Those books, actually, it's okay to self-publish, but it just means building an audience and sort of treating it more like a business. And there are, of course, steps that you need to go through for self-publishing that the publishing house would do for you. What self-publishing gives you is a little more autonomy. It gets your book out faster. You get to choose the cover, you know, that sort of thing. And obviously what going with a traditional publisher gives you is that you don't have to think about things like page weight or formatting or getting a proofer or getting a copy editor, and, you know, those sorts of steps that your traditional publisher will do for you. So I don't know if that gives you sort of like a preliminary sense of self-publishing versus traditional.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for answering that. And please, my phone is ringing. I'm so sorry. I thought I turned off the ringer, but I won't answer it. But yeah, so if you guys have questions about what Suzanne just explained, please chime in. This is a huge subject. We could talk about this for the whole entire hour. So, but we do have a question here from, I think it's Tamika. And Tamika asks, Suzanne, did you have a large list when you started, or were those sales organic? And I'm not sure if she's talking to you or talking to me, so I'm going to answer this and then I'll let you answer it as well. So with my book, I did not have a large list. I didn't even have a list at all. I basically started my list very recently, my email list. So no, I didn't even have a list. Barely had a list. Suzanne, how about you?
Well, let's see. So I think, Tamika, you're probably sort of asking about if you get a book out there, do you need a list in order to get a readership? And the common answer would be yes. Like a publisher, when they look at a proposal or whatever, they'll look for who's your audience and how have you already built an audience. So for Deshay, like she was showing in her proposal, what we did was sort of show that although she didn't have a huge list, she was someone who was in the conversation in terms of social media. She was a talk show host, award-winning talk show host, and even if it was local, like you just sort of leave those words out. It's like award-winning talk show host, wow. So so things like that. And we showed that she had a very, that she was very active on her own blog and that she was on Facebook. And oftentimes the publishers will see that you're building a platform and that will excite them. So, a lot of people will say, oh, you have to get your readership big before you publish the book. And the good news is, you don't always have to do that. It's sort of in how we present you to the publisher, and that can a lot of times be the selling point. And actually, there's a lot of treasures that we have that we don't even know about. It's like we go about our lives and we think like, oh, I have nothing to show a publisher. But in fact, a lot of times when I mine the treasure of who you are and your history and who you know, you'll find really surprising things that we can put in a proposal or a query letter to an agent that will make you pop off the page. So so I think we did that a lot for you, Deshay, when we were sort of writing up your proposal, just really mining your experience to show them that you were someone who was in the conversation and could gain a big readership and also knows about trends and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't have an email list, but I had been blogging, and I really recommend anybody who's thinking about writing a book start a blog because one, it gets you, you're practicing writing all the time. So I would write 1 or 2 posts every single week. So I got into the mode of writing frequently, right? And the second thing is I started to build a following. Now, I didn't have an email list, but people followed my blog, and people started following me on Facebook and that kind of thing. It wasn't a huge following, but, it was something. And, I think that definitely helped me because when my publisher looked at all my blogs, she could see that, I also had pretty images, and I knew how, I had a voice. I established my voice. And there was a lot of content in there that was helpful when I started to write my book. So, yeah. What other questions do we have? I'm going to check the chat box here real quick. No more questions about self-publishing or going with a traditional publisher? If you think of one, just pop it in the chat box. I'll keep checking. So the next point on our list is the secret why books like Chicken Soup for the Soul go viral and how yours can too. So you want to speak on that, Suzanne?
Yeah, so there are a couple, so there's a lot of hidden in that, obviously, that statement. That statement is sort of fiery and exciting, but what I really mean when I talk about books like that, it's just the contributor model book. So when you look at Jack Canfield, who was a high school teacher before he became the author of this Chicken Soup for the Soul series, you know, it wasn't like he had a big list or a big audience or anything, but he did contributor model, which is similar like what HuffPost is doing or what Mastin Kipp did with his blog, which is like, I'm going to get a lot of people to write for me, and their lists are going to become my list, you know. So in a way, when people got published with Jack Canfield and The Chicken Soup for the Soul, it was exciting to them. And sometimes it was the first time they'd been published in print, but they were still writers, you know, they still loved to write. And so they were telling their friends and getting a lot of interest from their families and that sort of thing. And that's one of the ways that Jack became such a huge success. And similarly with your book, you know, when we were talking about your book, it's like the contributor model is really great because you're writing less, which, you know, obviously we both know putting a book together takes a tremendous amount of time. But if you have that contributor model, you're getting people sort of taking from their interviews, and it's not as much organic writing, which is can be just so much of the work. And also you're getting their lists, which is really part of getting a readership. So that's one of the reasons that Jack went so big. But even if you're not doing a contributor model book, if you're doing a memoir or a novel or something else, you can still sort of use your friends and your family, right, in order to shout out that you're working on a book, ask them for you know, ideas. Anybody who feels involved in the process is going to want to shout out about your product once it's out there. So it's mostly just a way of like, don't feel like a lone ranger, you know, in the process. Just really get other people involved, and if you can, get them contributing. Like I have some CFOs and CEOs that I work with that, you know, a lot of times they're afraid to put like other people in their book or reference books that they've read that have influenced them, or, you know, even talk about other companies just because competition in that world is so scary for them. But in fact, the more they do that and the more they integrate people that they've read or people they've worked with or companies they admire, the better the book tends to do. So it's just a way to really, you know, get your people around you. That said, it's really important that we get support while we're working on a book. So you don't want too many cooks spoiling your pot in terms of the editing process. So anybody can come along in content and ideas. You're the author, right? So you want to make sure that you're the one who's really writing the book, and maybe get one trusted source to do the readership of it. So there's a fine line there. You're the author, but it's great to get contributors and reference people who have influenced you.
Awesome, thanks. I'm listening to you. I'm also thinking there may be some people on this webinar who are thinking, well, what else can I do now to help me get a book deal or to sell more books? So could you sort of go through the list of like what do you recommend for people as maybe they're just starting to write their book, or maybe they already have a book, but how can they, you know, get a bigger following? Or do you suggest people get an email list, or what do you suggest?
I suggest first that so your readership, you want to think about your readership. We all do, right? We all want exposure. But when you're working on your book, it's almost like, my belief is the book comes from like sort of a divine place, right? It's sort of downloaded into you. It's dropped into your lap. So we can think up an idea for a book. But often it's the idea that like wakes us up at 2 o'clock in the morning that we can't stop thinking about, and people will tell us like, oh, you know, that's never going to sell, or you know, whatever people say. But it's that book that like won't leave you alone, and you just want to be with it, right? So when you're in that idea process, it's like the sort of the worst thing we can do is get advice, you know, from a lot of people. One trusted person who's really open and listening and asking questions and not trying to be the quote-unquote expert, but just as sort of being there with you and hearing you out and hearing you work towards the best-selling idea that's sort of been dropped into your lap. That's okay, but getting too many people involved in the process at that point, even spouses and best friends and stuff, it's really an intimate process. So I'm talking about the person who's just had an idea, maybe I'm going to write this book, or they've just started to scribble stuff down. If you can be intimate with that and then create a readership that's about something else, right? Like I have a writer who is a mom and she loves to cook and she loves horses. And so we sort of talked about what would her blog look like. Now her blog wound up being Surviving Suburbia, because she lives in like this really sort of wealthy upscale town, and she, you know, she doesn't hate it, but she doesn't love it, and she feels like sort of pudgy and unkempt compared to the other women. So she's writing this awesome, really funny blog about surviving suburbia. But anyway, she's not trying to move her book, you know, she's trying to just write about something that's fun to her, that she enjoys, like going to the page, and she's developed quite a readership. Now, when she sold her book, those same readers will come and buy the book, and her book is like off the charts right now, and she got one of the biggest agents in New York. So she didn't try to move her book right away into her readership. She got a readership about something else that was fun, it was free, it was interesting to people, they felt excited to visit. And now she's starting to say, hey, by the way, I have a book, and of course all those people are excited to buy her book because they've seen her blog. So that's like, you know, there are a million ways to go about it, and probably whatever way you're thinking of, there's a possible path, and that's what's so exciting about book writing. You know, I hear a lot of people say, like, oh, there's one way, this is how you have to do it, you have to get an agent, and then you it's not like that at all, actually. I've been in the industry since 1999, and it's like the path that people take to get their book published, I mean, it just varies so crazily, so wildly, and that's what's so exciting about the industry, and it always changes your life. And I can promise you that if you have an idea for a book, it can happen. Like, it really can. And as long as there's not attrition, that's like your biggest enemy, right? It's like, I have this, I'm just going to give up. It's too hard. I can't figure it out. There's always a way. So just, you know, even when that like stump comes up, or that feeling that I'm not going to do it, or this isn't worthy, or whatever, there's always some path. The book is it's a divine gift. So just try to find those open doors if you can, and just being on a webinar like this is one of them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love talking about this, the notion of, you know, I'm sure some people have ideas for books and some people don't have an idea for a book, but maybe they have a business and they're trying to position themselves as an expert. But I think it doesn't matter either way. It's like, I love that you're saying it comes from a divine source, you know, and they're sort of channeling this information out to the world. And as you were describing that, it just made me think about, you know, I had written this proposal, and the proposal was, you know, beautiful, but it was just like too much stuff in the very beginning when I submitted it. And I remember talking to my agent, and she was like, you know, this is so awesome, but you really need to figure out, how is this different from other books? Like, how is this different from other home decor books? Because it definitely had this home decor slant. And so I started doing research, and I started looking at all these home decor books. And, you know, at first I was just distraught, because I was like, there's so many beautiful home decor books. Like, why on earth does there need to be another one? I seriously cannot think of like anything new that I could talk about that hasn't already been done. And I actually went to my coworker's office. I was at work, and I was like bawling. I was like, I can't do this. I can't write anything new. Everything's been done. Everybody's better than me, and, you know, all these negative voices. And that night, I went to bed and I meditated about it. And the next day I was driving to work, and it just hit me. It just popped out. I started asking myself, well, as I'm looking at home decor books, you know, what is missing for me? Like, what else would I want? Yeah, this is awesome, but what else would I want? And it came to me, it was so clear. It was like, I want to know more about the people who live in the houses. I want to know where they're, you know, do they have a sugar daddy, you know, who's providing all the money to make this beautiful space? Or did they hire an interior designer? Or did a magazine come in and style it? Like, who are the people? And then I decided I wanted to make my book different by interviewing everyday people who are creating beautiful spaces. And that was it. And that's all I needed to make it a little bit different. But it was something that I was really interested in writing about. So it was not a struggle. It was actually easy. The words poured out. The people came together. The photographers came together. And it was work, but it was actually really fun. And, you know, it didn't take that long. And then once it came out, it sold really fast. So I love the idea of connecting with, your heart and leaving it open to the universe, to the source, or to God to help you, to guide you. If you have an idea, or whether you have an idea or you need inspiration for an idea. And also, we have a comment here from Casey I just want to throw out. It's not really a question, but it says, Casey is the designer of Easy Webinar, the platform that we're using for this webinar, and he says, I wrote my book and it got a bestseller on Amazon, but I have a much bigger one that I wanted to publish with a bigger publisher. So Casey, I'm just curious, what is your book about, and do you have any advice for Casey, Suzanne, to get a bigger publisher? He's already written one. Was that self-published? You can tell us on the chat. And yeah, Suzanne, any advice for him?
Hey, Casey, thank you so much for creating this incredible forum for us to be doing a webinar. We're so happy you're here. Okay, so it looks like a bestseller on Amazon is going to look really good to a big publisher. And it depends on what you mean by big. So if you want to go with like the big four, which is, so in New York there are the 4 biggest publishers, and within them they have a lot of different imprints. And those are the places where you would get like a big advance, and the people would be able to sell you to, big brick and mortar stores and get you on bestseller lists, that are obviously, larger than Amazon. But the fact that you've already gotten a bestseller on Amazon, and also that you've developed, created this incredible piece of technology that so many people are using, that alone shows that you have a mouthpiece in the culture. And really, like, it doesn't even matter what your book is about once you have that way of showing the publishers that you're in the conversation, like we talked about before. That'll go a very, very long, long way. And you know how to write, obviously, or you wouldn't have a bestseller on Amazon. But what you want to do first is to find, obviously, the agent that has sold books that are similar to the one that you're writing now, that you're working on now, and you query them with a query letter and a recipe for the book proposal, which it can vary. I have a very specific recipe that I use because it gets looked at again and again. People never ignore it. So I always use that same sort of recipe. And people query anywhere from like, you can query the top 12 agents in your industry, in your field. You can go all the way up to 100. There are 6,000 agents out there. So, so if you do 60, it's only 1%. And once you get sort of the proposal and the query going, and you get the names, it's not, it's sort of like send a few out every day, and it's not a big deal. I'm not seeing that you wrote anything about what it is or whatever, but I would love to hear. I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah, we also have a comment here from Tanya Rubin, and she says, "Is that Tracy Bleckerman, Lost in Suburbia? Is that the book you were talking about, Suzanne?"
Lost in Suburbia. Oh, no, this is actually Susan Strecker, who just came out with the book Night Blindness. And she's the one who's writing a blog about suburbia, and it is hysterical. But yeah, I forgot about Lost in Suburbia. Yeah, that's another great one. I don't know if Tracy started that blog before or after she got her book out. I can't remember. But yeah, it's very similar.
And Suzanne, just to follow up on what you were just talking about as far as, getting the attention of the big 4 publishers, do you have to have an agent for that? Or is that something that you can just send off yourself? Can you send a query yourself, or do you have to have an agent?
No, for the big 4, you have to have an agent. And there are certain agents that work, they get noticed sort of right away by those big 4. It's like, a lot of the agents my first-tier agents that I send my writers to, if they have something that they're behind, then the publishers sort of look at them right away. So there are different tiers of agents. That doesn't mean if you get an agent who isn't hooked in with the big 4, a lot of them work for the big 4 first as a as an editor or an acquisitions editor or whatever, and then they go to agenting. And so those people are really locked in sort of with the crowd that is in New York. But that doesn't mean that if you get sort of a lesser known agent that you're not going to get a book deal. It just might take a little bit longer, or sometimes it's like I have a writer right now who got with one of the hugest agencies out in LA, but he's with a new agent there. And so she's taking a little bit longer to sell the book, but all of them are looking at it and all of them are really excited about it. But so there's different tiers of agents, but you do need an agent in order to get in those big four. That said, there are hundreds of smaller publications, independent publications like the one like Skyhorse that you went with, that are amazing to publish with. Now, they don't give advances as readily, but you make the money out of royalties, your book stays in print longer, you often get a lot more attention. So so I wouldn't say like that's the only way to go, but if you want a big publishing deal that a lot of people are talking about, and that's traditionally when you go with the big four, and yeah, you need an agent for that.
I also had another question. I was on a forum in Facebook the other day, and someone had asked this question for us, and it was, as far as financial investments, is there a difference between, trying to get your book published with a publisher or self-publishing? So can you talk about that a little bit? I know for me, for example, I didn't consider self-publishing because my book is a design book, and it's nearly 200 pages with over 250 pictures. It's hardcover. I'm assuming that would have been very expensive to produce. Plus, I would have to sell it myself. I don't really know that much actually about self-publishing because I got the deal fast. I'm sure if I really wanted to write a book and I didn't get it fast, I probably would have considered self-publishing. But can you talk about like the investment of self-publishing, and is there any difference between making more one way or the other? Oh, you're muted still.
Okay, sorry. Casey, we're just getting used to your brilliant technology. So the investment of self-publishing, it really depends. There's a lot of factors to self-publishing. One of them is like just how good you want your book to look. And you can get a book self-published for like a couple $100, but it might not be that pretty and lovely to look at. But if you want like sort of a book that looks like it's on the shelf, one of the New York Times bestsellers or whatever, and it's looks a lot like that, then it would be probably more of an investment for you. The investment for self-publishing is really upfront, and there are so many houses that have a self-publishing arm, like Hay House. Greenleaf is its own imprint. Monkfish has a self-publishing arm, and then obviously Amazon. And a lot of times I do a package for my writers who want to self-publish really good-looking books. So we line up like the copy editor, and the copy editor is the person that goes through like grammar and does, basically follows the Chicago Manual style, make sure there are no mistakes anywhere in your work. But they're not a development editor. You don't want a copy editor who's also trying to tell you about content because because that's not their job. And then the proofer. The proofer sort of formats the pages, and then you have somebody who does your cover design, the inside design, somebody who will figure out paper weight and sort of the size of the book, and then you have to go to printing, right? Like somebody like Ingram or a distributor that does the big houses but also has a self-publishing arm. And they usually do print on demand, but you have to buy a certain number of copies in order for it to make, so you can't like, okay, I want to print 10 books or whatever, you have to print out 500 or whatever their minimum is. So there are a lot of stages, and a lot of it is also the publicity and getting word out and knowing how to do that scheduled publicity of like 6 months in advance, how to get the review copies out, who to send it to, and that's probably like a bigger conversation than we have time for, but there are a lot of tiers to that launch that are really important, especially for the self-published writer.
Yeah, and I think it's important to think about, if you're self-publishing, if you already have a big audience, because if when you sell your book, you're just paying for the printing and the materials, well, all those things you listed. So to think about, what your investment is and how much you can get back once the book is sold. It seems like you would make more if you're self-publishing because you're in control of all that. Whereas, if you have a book deal with a publisher, they're going to take a very large percent. Like mine, they take a very large percent. But I didn't have any upfront cost at all, and I got an advance. I got a small advance, but it was still an advance, and and I'm going to get royalties off my books as well. I think for me, one thing that was also really cool is that I didn't have very many connections with. I didn't have any interest actually in selling my book through a distributor or trying to figure all that stuff out. And my book sold out partially because I was marketing it, and I had started my email list, and I definitely was marketing it, having a book launch, and I did a book tour and all that. But the publisher has a sales team, and that sales team sent my book out to all these distributors, and they sold tons of copies for me. So I don't know if I would have been able to sell that many copies on my own, maybe, but I didn't have to really lift a finger after that point, which was nice as far as the really big deals. And I definitely lifted a finger when it came to my book launch party and the book tour and everything. But beyond the money that you make from the royalties or the advance, Suzanne and I have talked about this a lot, how writing the book just opens up doors to your career and brings in new opportunities. So I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about that too, Suzanne. Beyond, beyond the money physical money you're getting from the book, your career path and the money that brings and the joy.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Deshay. Because a lot of times now, some of my writers have seen gigantic advances that have just changed their entire financial reality, which is always great. And sometimes people will self-publish and get picked up, like Casey was saying, he was an Amazon bestseller, and sometimes people like that will get picked up by traditional publishers, and they'll give them gigantic advances, like someone like Eckhart Tolle, or so I think again, as I said before, the path is there's just so many ways that it's going to happen. But what in terms of writing a book, self-published or not, is that once you write that book, it's a calling card for your enterprise, right? So whenever someone comes to me about, wanting to write their book, whether they even have an idea sort of gelled or not yet, or we have to work on that process, or they have the full manuscript done and they're ready to move it into the world, I always talk about sort of them as an enterprise. Like, how is this fitting into your world? Because the book opens so many doors. It's like they just see you then as an expert. It's like they want you to come and read at their store. They want you to come to their to be a keynote speaker at their next conference or to lead these workshops. I mean, it's on, like when I got my first book deal, it was overwhelming. I just felt like, oh my God, I don't know how to do all these things. They think I'm an expert, but really all I know how to do is write a book. So I think that's what's most exciting, is that we can't even really see how many doors are going to open when the book's out there. I remember when I was first working on my book, and I was scared because it's like, you're hiring editors, you're going to workshops, you're spending time at, free webinars, but still it's time, and it's scary. And I was dating a guy who was much older than me, and he was a very, very successful painter. He was at museums and galleries, and he said to me, honey, your book is money in the bank. It's going to keep you going in the world. It's going to be something that's always out there that people can recognize you by. So don't worry about the time and the money you're spending now. It is totally worth the investment. And it has been. I mean, I can't believe what happened after that first book. And I'm sure, you're sort of at the beginning stages, but I'm sure that's going to, or has already felt like that to you too, Deshay.
Well, I definitely feel like it's helped a lot. I'd probably still be working at the college, and I didn't feel like that was a good fit for me. So, by writing my book and starting my business at the same time, it's completely changed my life. Working from home is is meant for me. And yeah, it's brought in opportunities because people see my name and they're like, oh, she knows how to do this. I'm going to invite her to come and speak about social media, or I'm going to invite her to talk about blogging, or come to my bookstore and do a talk on home decorating and budget, or come to my vintage bazaar and set up a booth and sell your stuff and stay here for free. So it definitely has opened doors, and I expect it's going to continue to do so. I have a comment here that asks, I think this is from Tanya too, what is, when you say small advance or large advance, what does that mean?
Hi, Tanya. Let's see. The large advance, I mean, I know a writer, a friend of mine, who had never published anything, and he just got $1 million advance for his first book. So, so it could be really big. Most writers, when they start out and they get what we call a large advance, it's like, 6 figures for a 2-book deal, so that you don't have to sell your next book. A smaller advance, and by 6 figures, I mean anywhere, the 250,000 deal is a little rarer than, say, like 100,000 or 150,000 or something like that. But my writers have sort of seen that scale. And then the smaller advance, which can happen either with independent publishing, the smaller publishing houses, or with the bigger ones, is like anywhere down from 10,000. And some people are seeing 3,500. There's a mystery crime writer that I work with that wanted to go with a really small house this time. She's a co-writer for a best-selling series, but she wanted to try the independent houses, and she was like, oh my God, I'm getting no advance. But her book is selling out on Amazon, at Barnes & Noble and stuff, so she'll get a lot of royalties from that. So it's like the advance is sort of a funny thing, because we want advance. It's so great to get a bunch of money all at once, and certainly, for me, it was like a huge shift in my life when that happened. But I think also it can be difficult to live up to that for some writers, and sometimes it's easier to just get the money in terms of royalties. But you can like hit the bestseller list with an advance that was only, I think Snow Falling in Cedars got an $11,000 advance, and now, obviously that book went viral. So again, anything can happen. That's what's so exciting about the book world. But yeah, that's a long answer, Tanya, to your big advance, small advance.
Yeah, so basically it's anywhere from nothing to $1 million. I remember being very frustrated by that kind of answer when I was doing research or trying to figure out, what I might expect from a book advance. And I remember talking to some other nonfiction writers, and like Suzanne says, it's all over the map. But what I found out from my research from talking to a few nonfiction writers who sort of had the same platform as me, which was really small, was for maybe $10,000 to $20,000 or something like that. But it could be that you don't get anything, and then you get the royalties. So it's really all over the place. It's hard. You just kind of have to let go of any expectations. Really, just set your intention of what you want, but then let go of the expectation. It's gonna be awesome, but you don't know when it's gonna be awesome. If it's gonna be awesome at the very beginning, or if it's gonna be awesome during the process, or a few years later. When all the royalties come together, you get some big speaking engagement, or it's hard to say, but it seems like it's always good. I haven't really talked to anybody who said, like, gosh, I wish I never would have written my book. Have you, Suzanne?
No, I can't say I've ever had that happen. The biggest thing that happens when people write books is that their life changes in ways they hadn't expected. Like, of course, we expect our careers to change because that's part of writing a book. But other things happen, and I don't know, this might be specific to my writers that I work with in the Gateless method because it's so opening and so affirming. But like, my writers will wind up like falling deeply in love for the first time in their lives in a way they could never have expected. They wind up moving to like the city of their dreams finally. Their health shifts. Like, just things happen in writing a book that I guess I never really realized it until I started working with writers, and these gigantic shifts started to happen. Like, oh my God, I've been in this marriage for, loveless marriage for 12 years, and I started this process, and now, like, I'm with the man of my dreams, and we're actually moving to, this farm, and, out of the city, just like, it was really, really, it was almost like too unbelievable to believe. So, I think the money thing is great, and the fact that you're creating an enterprise just by writing the book, but also, watch out, because incredible stuff happens when you start to write a book. I believe so much in writing as sort of a divine intervention.
Well, and there's lots of information and literature and stories about how writing is a healing process, and lots of different ways how it can be healing and bring in things that, even just journaling can bring in things that you're trying to manifest in your life. So I love that. So we have one more point, and then I'll just check and see if there's any more questions. We'll try to wrap up pretty soon. But the last point is the #1 technique best-selling authors use to become epic chart toppers, and why it's accessible to absolutely everyone. What would that be, Suzanne?
It's funny, when we talked about that, I had like, the #1 thing is to include people in your life. Like, shout out to people on Facebook if you're on Facebook, which I assume you are if you're here. Like, really include people in your writing process, not in terms of being like, showing your work and getting advice, more in terms of like, these people, like I said before, these people have had a huge impact on my life, and I want to shout out to say thank you. I'm referencing these people in my writing because they've, shifted my life in these ways and given me these lessons. Like, really integrating the world in on your process. So while it's this intimate, beautiful relationship you have with your work, it's also like sort of throwing out the seeds to all the people around you, showing them how you came to this place in your life. So often people are sort of afraid. They're afraid to do that. They have their blinders on. They think, like, I can't include anyone else because I have to do this thing alone, and like, that's the only way I'm going to get a big audience, and like, that sort of thing. But in fact, including people, naming people, talking less about ourselves and more about other people is probably the single most important thing when you're working towards becoming an author and towards making it as an author. So I have a writer now, for example, who, when she published her first memoir, she was like on Oprah and all the big Today Show and da-da-da-da. And now she's working on another book, and she's sort of poo-pooing that whole world and doesn't want anything to do with it and doesn't want to be on Facebook. And, we had like sort of, we've had like these really, really beautiful almost therapy sessions about what's happening with her there. And it's like the feeling of being seen is so frightening to her, right? But her wanting to get this next book out so important. So it's almost like, which is more important? And she has decided that getting the book out is more important to her. So she wants to include everybody who was part of that first process, even if it scared her to be seen, because they really made her a household name. So it's like really looking at where's my resistance and including everyone that I know in my process, saying thank you, shouting hey, and telling them that they were part of my trajectory in where I am today, being able to write this book. So does that make sense, Deshay? Is that too sort of ethereal?
No, I mean, I think that you're a great role model of that, because you're very active on social media, and you invite people to come to your home, your salon, and you invite writers to come over, and people share in that experience. So I can definitely see how that has worked for you. And I think the message is just that you have to put yourself out there and you have to network. So maybe there are people in your life that can help you with this process. Like, I never would have guessed that I could publish a book. 2 years ago, it wasn't even on my agenda. Who would have thought that I would have met you, and then you would have introduced me to my agent, and now I have a book and quit my job. So, I think you just have to sort of put it out there. That's where I believe in this, in the spirit. And like, if you really have something that you want to do and you put it out there, and you have a strong intention that these people will come into your life. It's not that you're sitting on the couch, but you're actively pursuing it. But, you know, let the higher power help you out a little bit, because you'll get better results that way than if you're just, you know, trying to do it on your own. And then I think there's other, you know, there's other ways that you can do it. You know, just getting to know people that you admire. You know, this is what I would tell my students, or the alum that I worked with in the Career Center. If you want something and you're not sure how to get it, do your research. Start finding people who are doing what you want to do. Learn their story. See how they did it. Ask them for help. And, you know, try to mimic their process. It's not always going to be the same for everybody. But once you start putting the action in, you'll be surprised by the results. Maybe it's not exactly how you thought it was going to be, but it comes about in mysterious ways. And I certainly believe in miracles. So, yeah, I love that. And it's funny, I just noticed that it says that the chat box is full, so I don't know if there's a limit. This is my very first time using this stuff, so it says the chat box is full. So if there are any questions and you guys are on Facebook, I'm also getting some messages from my Facebook account. I'm getting it on my phone. I'm so high tech, right? I have my phone, my laptop, my Kindle, and still I'm like, is this working? I think so. But anyway, if you can't get onto the chat box, just send me a Facebook message if we're Facebook friends. If we're not, I think you can still send me a message. And the funny thing is that Tanya Rubens just sent me a message. I think, is it okay if I say this, Tanya? That she just got a book deal offer from Skyhorse, which is my publisher. So congratulations, Tanya. We definitely have a lot to talk about. That's cool. And I also see that Stacia's on here. Thank you, Stacia. If you're still here, I'm going to ask Stacia to send a link on Chatbox. This is a special offer that Suzanne and I have for you today, because we want to help you. So both of us have packed schedules, but we've opened up a few slots. I just have a very few slots. Suzanne, I don't know how many you have, but we have an offer for you. Do you want to just go ahead and describe what yours is, and hopefully Stacia can send you the link. Stacia, if Stacia's not there, I'll definitely send you guys the link in the next email. But why don't you describe what you have to offer, Suzanne?
Okay, so yeah, I actually have a wait list now, and I'm full up with writers, but then Deshay told me about this incredible webinar, and I wanted to make sure I could create an offer just for you guys. So what I did was I put together sort of a little package of being able to help you sort of jumpstart your process wherever you are in your process. And hopefully Stacia will be able to include the link. It looks like she did. But it involves reading a portion of your manuscript. It can be 10 to 25 pages, and like I said in the offer, it can be like on coffee filters or napkins or, you know, whatever you have, or it can be part of your finished manuscript. And then I do a very in-depth questionnaire, not just about the writing of the book, but just about who you are and where you want to go as an author, because I work also with people who are published authors or in their book deal stage, getting them seen by the public and getting them on bestseller lists and that sort of thing. So we want to make sure, even if you're just at that idea stage, that we think of that whole ball of wax. So the questionnaire is really about your life, where you want to go, what you're trying to manifest through writing, you know, what writing means to you. It's quite extensive. So that is included within the package. And then we would get on Skype, or if you're around here, we could meet at my dollhouse salon where Deshay wrote most of her book, or some of her book, and really start manifesting your next steps to getting your book deal. And normally a package like that is $550, but for Deshay's webinar peeps, I put it down to $350, and I think we're just offering it for the next 72 hours so that I don't get too overbooked. But I would love to hear from you guys.
Awesome, and I would just say you guys should totally take her up on this. It is totally worth every single penny and way more. So I appreciate you given us this special deal for your webinar and open up space for these folks. And so my offer is a little bit different. I'm a lifestyle design coach, and what I'd like to offer you is 4 clarity sessions on how to get into your sweet spot. So this may be that you're trying to figure out if you're happy in your career, or if you need a career transition, or perhaps it's just your overall lifestyle. You know, how can you make your life more sweet? How can you get into that zone where you're thriving and you're not just surviving? How can you be creative? How can you be more alive? How can you surround yourself with beauty and channel that energy? So, which I call the sweet spot, which is basically just surrounding yourself with beauty and success. You know, whether that's in your career or your home or your personal style. I think that what I love to do is help people find work that fulfills them and that changes their life. And, you know, there's a lot of life coaches out there that I really love and respect, but there's also a lot of people out there who are like, yeah, let me show you how to change your life and transform your life. And it's like, well, what have you done in your life, you know? And I'm kind of proud of the fact that I'm actually doing it, and I'm going to continue to do it. I'm going to continue, hopefully, to write more books and, you know, continue to create my own projects on the side, as well as helping other people to get into their sweet spot. So that's 4 sessions, and it's in the link. You can read all about it, and you can read more about me and Suzanne through this link. You can sign up directly. My sessions are normally $600, and I'm offering it today for $495. And again, it's the same thing in the next 72 hours. So we'd love to work with you. If you're interested, just go on the link, take a look, and I have a PayPal button. You can just click right on it. And for Suzanne, just contact her directly if you have questions. If you have questions for me, of course, you can shoot me an email as well. My email is deshay@sweetspotstyle.com, and Suzanne is SuzanneKingsbury@gmail.com. Is that right? Is that right, Suzanne?
Yeah, sorry. Am I unmuted? Oh, yeah, there. It's like, it's a little delayed. I just wanted to say, too, yeah, that is right, Suzanne Kingsbury at Gmail. And, yeah, just give me a holler so if you are interested. But, yeah, and I also wanted to say, I have, you know, Deshay and I have done a lot of work together. Like, I might have helped her get her book deal and write her proposal and that sort of thing, get her agent. But she has helped me so much in my own business. I mean, she is really my go-to person. Like, you know, my business is thriving, and a lot of you know, a lot of the sort of sticking points that I've gotten to in my work have been because I've been able to call on Deshay, and I'm lucky to have her just as my sweet spot style coach whenever I need it, because we become so close. But I've also sent authors to her who are looking to be in their sweet spots and sort of clarify their goals, and I have heard just like amazing things about her. So I feel really honored that you asked me to be on as your first guest of your webinar series. It's really exciting, and I love what you do, and I just think you're such a bright, twinkling star, and the way you manifest, you know, your own dreams and other people's dreams, it's like no other. So I feel really lucky that somehow the universe put us together in this little town.
Thank you so much. I love you, and, you know, as I said before, my life has changed since I met you, and I value you as not only someone I respect as an author and a writing coach and editor and all of that stuff, but also as a friend. And so thank you so much for being on this webinar, and thank you guys for attending. And I don't think there's any more questions here, but feel free to email us or contact us with questions, and hopefully we will see you soon. So I'm going to sign off here and say have a good day, and thanks for showing up. Bye.
Thanks, you guys.